Good evening. We're glad that you can be with us, and I know that this is probably a little bit different than what you were expecting this evening. Me too. But with the weather being the way that it is, we're going to have a bit of an abbreviated kind of service, and so we will be working through what my class was going to work through tonight at the end of Luke 23. So if you want to go ahead and be turning there, that's where we're going to be. We will go ahead and get all of the announcements out on the front end right now, and then we'll have a prayer, and then we'll spend some time in study, and then hopefully sometime between 7:30, 7:40, we'll close out in a prayer. The elders did want to make mention, we obviously don't want this to happen, but in the case that something did happen, the emergency plan that is in place, there will be people stationed in the back to help. Most of you know where the educational building is, most likely, but we'll be going into the educational building through both sides and into the middle, and they just wanted y'all to know people would be placed there if that was necessary, but we're going to try to get over and through plenty early this evening. So anyway, with that being said, just a few quick announcements that we want to make and be aware of for the sick list and prayer list and everything like that. It's a pretty long one, so I'll do my best to make it through it. We have Miss Shirley Sewell. How is she doing, David? Okay, doing a bit better. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So she's making improvements, and so that's wonderful news. We also want to mention Miss Lisa Hafer, that is Robin Chun's sister, and her cancer diagnosis. We also have our brother Roger Rittenberry. He is finally back home, so that is great news. He has a gnarly scar, so that's going to be really cool for future VBS productions, and I can say that now that he's all okay and everything. But they are going to send him back for a few more tests to try to figure out exactly what it was that caused him to faint, caused him to pass out. And so let's be prayerful for him as they try to nail down what that is. We have also Miss Beatrice Biggs. Miss Clara, is she doing any better?
Yeah, she is.
Okay. Well, wonderful news. Also, Rayburn King, that is Joyce King's brother-in-law, is not doing well and been asked to be put on the prayer list. We also want to keep Miss Kim Roark in our prayers. I heard that she was able to go back to work today after she had double carpal tunnel surgery, so that is great news. And then David Young, the minister in Murfreesboro, who we've been trying to keep up with, he has had an adrenal gland and prostate removed, and they think they've gotten most of the cancer, but they're not sure that that's going to be enough. And so, kidney removed. Okay, he is at home. Still a lot of problems. Okay. And then on a good note, good news, we want to be praying for Dylan and Emily as they had their baby girl Elsie today, and she was 7 pounds, 9 ounces, and 19 inches. Did I get all those facts right? Good deal. So that's wonderful. We'll be praying for them and their new baby. We have a few up and coming things. I'll be really quick with these. The Shadow of the Cross service will be this Friday at 7 p.m. Hope you can be with us for that. The church office will also be closed Friday. There is a wild game supper May 7th at 6 p.m. I hope you can be there for that. And then men's prayer breakfast is May 14th. As far as the youth go, the big thing is Paul needs the pictures of seniors from birth to present, and they need to be turned in by May 8th. He said he needs 10 to 12 pictures, so that means like 2 serious pictures and then 10 embarrassing pictures. We want a good, healthy balance. No serious pictures, all embarrassing pictures. So a really good balance for that. So make sure you get those in by May 8th. The fan van will be going April 19th to watch softball at 5 p.m. Children's Church May 15th, Youth Retreat April 22nd through the 24th, and then Prom Alternative April 30th. I believe that is all of the most up-to-date information that we have. Is there anybody for the sick or prayer list that I need to add? Okay. Oh, yes.
We have a new granddaughter.
Wonderful.
Mary Jane, but she was born premature.
Oh, no.
One
Okay. Most definitely. We will definitely be praying for her. Mary Jane, that is Barbara and Willie's granddaughter. She was born and born premature, and so having some breathing troubles. So we'll definitely keep her in our prayers. Any others? Okay. Well, if you would, please bow with me, and we'll go to our God in prayer. Lord, thank you so much for today. Thank you for the beauty of spring. And we thank you for giving us this midweek where we can come and reset and refocus and finish out this week devoted to you and dedicated to you. And we ask that by the end of the evening we can know you better and that we can know your word better and that it can transform us to make us more like you would have us to be. We ask that we can be touched and changed by the story of your son. And we also ask that you can be with all of those that are on our sick and prayer list. We are so thankful for some. We've had so many good reports and success stories, and we want to attribute the glory for those to you, God. We thank you for the doctors that you have worked with and worked through, and we also ask your hand of healing to be on those that are desperately in need of you right now. We ask that you please be with baby Mary Jane, among many others, as you know their situations even better than we do. We're so thankful for our church family. Please edify us and grow us and help us to be who you need us to be. We ask that you can be with us over this upcoming weekend, and we pray that we can be mindful of the focus that the world is focusing on, that Christians are focusing on, and may we also take opportunity to plant seeds and create connections and relationships with visitors and others that might be in need of you, that might be in need of salvation. And so may you please work through us, God. We are so blown away with who you are and so thankful for all that you've done for us. And even though we don't fully understand why, we ask that you can give us a better understanding as we walk this walk of life. We thank you for your son Jesus and pray all through him. Amen. Okay. Control. Good deal. What we're going to be looking at and where we're going to be finishing up, you're kind of jumping into, I guess, the middle of the study if you aren't normally with us on Sundays. But where we're making our way is in preparation to good. That was in the back. Lights weren't flickering for any other reason. The switches are all fine now. That was a mean joke, Tony. I'm just kidding. He didn't do that on purpose. So on the way to the path to the cross, as we're working towards what we're going to look at in the crucifixion and the resurrection this Sunday, where we've gotten is last Sunday morning, we walked through the Jewish half of Jesus' trial, or we looked through all of the different ways that the Jews contributed to his crucifixion. And so we looked at his betrayal in the garden, we looked at him being held in the high priest's house, and we looked at his trial before the council. But keep in mind that in the Roman world, the Jews only had as much power as the Romans allowed them to have. So if the Jews wanted to truly crucify Jesus, they had to take him and turn him over to the Romans and convince the Romans that he was worthy of that, or that he was guilty to be punished in that way. So as they get through their trial, they say, well, we've heard all that we need to hear. He's more or less claimed to be verse 71. What further testimony do we need? This is of chapter 22. We have heard it for ourselves with our own lips. So the Jews believe they have a concrete case to take Jesus before the Romans and get him killed, get him crucified. So we're going to walk through the Roman half, if you will, the Roman half of Jesus' path to the cross. So looking, I guess, at this part 4, this is kind of where we make the transition away from the Jews and into him being tried by the Romans. And if you ever have wondered why is Jesus put on trial by so many different people? Well, that's part of the process. It began with the Sanhedrin, and now it's transitioning to Pilate. And so we'll pick up and read in Luke chapter 23, starting in verse 1, and we'll read about it. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before Pilate, and they they began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king." And Pilate asked them, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." Verse 4, Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no guilt in this man." But they were urgent, saying, "He stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee even to this place." So we'll pause right there as we see Jesus before Pilate on I guess the first account, because he's going to be taken back before Pilate here in just a few moments. Keep in mind that it's interesting when they bring these charges before him, when they drag him before Pilate. Look in verse 2 what they say. He is forbidding people to give tribute to who? And what do we remember Jesus saying just a few chapters before? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Give unto God what is God. Jesus actually never forbid anybody from giving tribute to Caesar. And that's kind of how twisted all of this process is. That's how convoluted and made up and almost conspiracy theory type approach that the Jews are having to fabricate these charges, where Jesus actually didn't say that at all, but that's what they claim that he did as they brought him before Pilate. And so Pilate begins to quiz him just a little bit. And as he asks him, "Well, are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus keeps his answer straight, as he did with the Sanhedrin. He says, "Well, you have said so." And Pilate finds no guilt in him. Now, we will take just a second and note why it's an interesting question to think, well, why doesn't Jesus, if he truly is the Christ and he is the Messiah, which we know that he is, well, why won't he just come out and tell people? Why won't he come out and say, yes, that's exactly who I am, and you're about to kill me. This is all wrong. Well, keep in mind that throughout the process of the gospel, and this is why it was really important for us 6-7 months ago to start at the beginning of Luke and work our way through it, is that all throughout the gospel of Luke, we see Jesus allows the audience to come to their own conclusion of who he is. Jesus doesn't, and this is kind of goes to, he even says something to this effect when he's before the Sanhedrin. He says, "If I tell you, you're not going to believe me anyway." Jesus doesn't want you to believe he's Jesus or the Messiah. He doesn't want you to believe he's the Son of God just because he says he's the Son of God. He wants us to believe he's the Son of God because we have seen him prove it, because we realize that what they should have realized through his miracles, through his teaching, through the fact that he was raising people from the dead, he was letting the blind to see, he was creating meals out of nothing, and he was helping the poor and the homeless. And they were supposed to come to this conclusion on their own. And at this point, if they hadn't, Jesus didn't want them to believe just because he said so. And I think in the same way, we're put in a similar position as we read through the Gospels. We're charged with the same question that he asked Peter when he said, "Well, who do you say that I am?" He wants us to come to that same conclusion based on what we've witnessed and based on what we've beheld. And I think that whenever we come to a conclusion on our own, we're a lot more firm in it, aren't we? And we're a lot more grounded in it, and it's more concrete than if we were just going off of what somebody else has told us, right? Whenever I find something to be true for myself, it means more. And I think Jesus knew that. And so that's why he seemed to approach these questions the way that he did, almost like he's sidestepping them. But in all reality, he's placing it on the audience to decide, well, are you truly the Messiah? Are you truly the King of the Jews? So Pilate, who has Jesus before him, finds no guilt in him, and they are very upset. The Jews are very upset by this verdict. They say, no, he stirs up people. He's teaching all throughout Judea, even from Galilee to this place. And when they say that, it is like Pilate has found his what he thinks is like his get-out-of-jail-free card when he realizes that he's from Galilee. Let's pick up reading in verse 6. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him over to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. Remember, it's the Passover, a lot of people coming into Jerusalem. Verse 8, when Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had long desired to see him, because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length, and he made no answer. The chief priests and scribes stood by, vehemently accusing accusing him. Verse 11, and Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate became friends with each other that very day, for before this they had been at enmity with each other. So we'll stop right there. Jesus is almost kind of passed off to Herod. And keep in mind that within the Roman government, that maybe they would have made an exception, but Herod would have only been able to truly give a verdict to punish Jesus if Jesus was extradited back to Galilee. So more or less, Pilate is getting Herod to weigh in on the situation, and let's say that Herod said, he's guilty, off with his head. Then Pilate could have made that call based on taking counsel in Herod, but it truly wouldn't have been Herod's decision because we're not in Herod's jurisdiction, we're in Pilate's. So as he is before Herod, and as Herod is questioning him, the first thing that we see is it's so funny. As the Jews, they were so eager to get Jesus convicted and so eager to get Jesus crucified. Pilate says, I'm pretty sure this guy's innocent. Finds out, oh, he's from Galilee. Herod's in town. Well, Herod's over Galilee. Let's have him try him and him weigh in on this situation. So have you ever had somebody before? Maybe you've been in like a store and you've had a question and the person you asked didn't have an answer for you. And so they were like looking really hard for somebody else who knew what they were talking about to pass you off on in hopes that that person could answer your question because they had no clue what you were talking about. Maybe it's just me. But I've had that happen before where I've been in a store, I've had some kind of question. They've looked at me like, followed by, well, I've only worked here a week and a day. And then they go looking for somebody who knows what they're doing. That's pretty well what Pilate has done right here. He is finding Jesus innocent. The crowd is not having it. So he finds Herod and it's like, thank goodness I can pass him off on Herod. And the Jews are like, good, maybe somebody that'll give us the verdict we want. And then Jesus walks in and Herod's all excited because he really wanted to meet Jesus. That had to be deflating for the Jews. As Jesus walked in, Herod was tickled to death. He was hoping that he could see him perform some kind of sign, some kind of miracle. And that's not what he got. Jesus was very, very silent treatment on Herod as he began questioning him, which goes along with the prophecy of Isaiah 53, if you want to make that connection. And something that's odd to me, I don't have an exact answer as to why, but a few possibilities. It's interesting that Herod was oh so excited to see Jesus, like more or less starstruck. Like he saw somebody he had been wishing and hoping to see, somebody that was like, I don't know, locally famous or a local hero. Is there anybody that's Macon County famous that you would be excited to see? Jared Hill, you're exactly right. If he walked in, we would all fall over and ask for autographs and ask him to do a bicycle kick with a soccer ball. But anyway, yeah, so you find somebody that is like locally famous and he's has a little bit of starstruck. And that part, the reason that stands out to me is because we look down just a few verses later and what are all of his guards doing to Jesus? They're mocking him and they're beating him and they're not treating him the way the way his guards treat Jesus doesn't line up with how excited he was to see Jesus. Now, why is that? I'm not for certain. My conclusion would be that it began to happen over time as Jesus refused to answer Herod, because silence to a superior's questions like that would be considered disrespectful, or it would be not a good thing if you were put on trial and you didn't answer the judge's questions. And so possibly over time Herod wasn't necessarily a fan of Jesus being beaten, but he wasn't answering his questions, and so he thought, well, maybe if we use some force we can get this guy to talk. But either way, we can't say for certain exactly why that happened the way it did, but we do know that Jesus was mocked. We do know that Jesus was treated with contempt. They clothe him up like a king. And Herod more or less says, I find him innocent too, and sends him back to Pilate, all humiliated like he is. And so there's like this ping pong of Jesus being sent from Pilate to Herod, back to Pilate. And keep in mind, at this point, we have two innocent verdicts. So now we go into the last time where Jesus is before Pilate, and this is where we'll probably draw all of our connections tonight. So picking up in verse 13, Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who is misleading the people. And after examining him before you, behold, I did not find this man guilty of any of your charges against him. Neither did Herod, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore just punish and release him." Verse 18, "But they cried out together, 'Away with this man and release to us Barabbas, a man who has been thrown into prison for an insurrection started in the city and for murder.'" Verse 20, Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus, but they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. He released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked, but he delivered Jesus over, and he delivered him over to their will. So as Pilate calls everybody back together, he tells them that he was innocent. I think so. Herod thinks so. I really don't know why you guys don't think that he's innocent. They're very urgent, they're very demanding, and they disagree. He's deserving of death. Crucify him, crucify him. And so there is this back and forth. There's this back and forth between Pilate and between the people. And as we walk back through it, notice the way that Pilate keeps defending himself. He says, "You brought me this man, you said he was misleading, but that's just not true. I didn't find it that way. Herod didn't find it that way. Just let us punish and release the man." They wouldn't stand for it. So they cry out all the louder, and he goes back once more in verse 20, desiring to release Jesus, but they wouldn't have it. And then a third time, verse 22, "Why, what evil has he done? I found him no guilt." Almost as if to say, if you would just tell me what he did, like if you would just tell me what he's guilty of, I have no problem punishing him. I have no problem crucifying him, but give me a reason. Give me a reason to. And alas, the people could not. They just wanted him to be killed. And so as they were urging, and as they were demanding, the end of verse 23, and their voices prevailed. And before we get to that, there's just a couple things we'll make note of. One is Luke writes this assuming that we already know the Passover custom of releasing a prisoner. And so it seemed at one point, like logically, the most rational prisoner to release, if you're going to release one, is the one that is least guilty. Right? Or maybe the one that he went through trial and it was the most debated. Like it was a 49-51% split, but he got convicted. That's the type of person that you would think it would make sense to release. And so Jesus, fitting the bill, given that he still can't find out what he's guilty of, there's just a lot of people yelling, "Crucify him." That would make sense for him to be the one. Punish him and release him. Let him be the one to go in that place, but that's not what the people wanted. They cried and they urged and they bellyached and they wanted him crucified. And so that is exactly what Pilate does. And that's exactly what Pilate decides. And I want us to reread verse 23 and verse 24 very carefully, because verse 23 and verse 24 are the two verses that are going to apply directly to you and me come tomorrow morning more than any of the others that we just read. So verse 23, let's pick up where it says, "But they were urgent, demanding with loud cries that he should be crucified." And these are the four words, church. This is it. "And their voices prevailed. So Pilate decided that their demands should be granted." Come tomorrow morning, come tomorrow in your work day, come 2 months from now, come whenever. There is going to be a moment where you and I are going to be just compelled by the crowd. where you and I are going to have what feels like the majority shouting so loudly, wanting us to choose in a certain way, wanting us to decide to think in a certain way, wanting us to act in a certain way, wanting us to say a certain thing. And you know what is very interesting about this situation, and what's very interesting about the situations that you and I will most likely find ourselves in. Do you remember just a few chapters ago why they wouldn't take Jesus in the middle of the day? Why they had to stage a coup to take him at night? Afraid of the crowds. But now that we're here, it seems that all the crowds want Jesus dead. And as far as Pilate's concerned, all the crowds want Jesus dead, because that's all the people that Pilate's being exposed to on this Friday morning. The actual majority of the Jews in Jerusalem, the thousands on thousands of Jews that have made their pilgrimage into Jerusalem, wouldn't have it. But the same way that we often have the majority thinks this way, or the masses believe this, or well, everybody does this, or everybody thinks that, in the same way, there is a false majority that Satan ever so craftfully puts before us to make us believe, well, everybody thinks like that, or everybody's doing it that way, or everybody is saying this, or believing this, or going down this path. I mean, it must be okay because that's what the majority is doing. In the same way that Pilate was fooled. In the same way that Pilate was fooled, I don't know about y'all, but I often find myself being tempted to be in the same boat. When all of the things around us seem to lead us to believe, well, this is what everybody's doing, or this is what everybody's saying, or this is what everybody's thinking, or this is how everybody's acting, that's not always true. Sometimes, maybe a majority of the times, it is those that it's those that we're surrounded with that we think they're the majority, but that just happens to be who we're surrounded by at that moment, if that makes any sense. And so you and I are going to have something that you have heard of long before you sat down in this pew this evening. You're going to have a couple different voices. One is not actually going to be on your right shoulder, but we'll pretend like it is just for funsies. And the other one is also not actually going to be on your left shoulder, but we'll pretend like it is for funsies. And Pilate had to wrestle with that. And he had to wrestle with what the crowd was saying in one ear, and then his internal voice of what he knew to be true in the other. And keep in mind, Pilate wasn't an easy one to just flop over and roll over and be steamrolled. Look at the process that Jesus had to go through. It wasn't like, here's Jesus, what's he in for? Nothing but kill him. Okay. Like it wasn't that short of a process. And keep in mind, it's not always going to be that short of a process with us. Sometimes when we're faced with big decisions, or sometimes when we're faced and we're being compelled by the crowd, or we're have peer pressure surrounding us, and don't buy the lie that just because you graduated, you stopped experiencing peer pressure, because that's not the truth in the least. So when we're being pressured from the outside, sometimes we're like Pilate, and sometimes we're like, well, no, that's not true. That's he is as innocent can come. And I'll even send him to Herod. And look, Herod, this person even agrees to me. And we reach out to somebody that is like-minded, and we realize that we're on the same page. We're not crazy. We're not the only one that thinks this way, but yet the crowd prevails. And he goes back and forth with them a second time, and he goes back and forth with them a third time. But after the crowd is able to weigh and wear Pilate down, what does verse 23 says? What does verse 23 say? And their voices prevailed. Will the voices prevail of the majority, or of peers around us, or of people from work, or people from school, or people when you get on social media or turn on a commercial and you see an ad and it wants you to believe that this is normal and everyone thinks this is okay, or that this is the way that love is supposed to look, or this is the way that we are supposed to think and act, or this is what everybody else is doing, so you really shouldn't have a problem with whenever that is all weighing in, will the voices prevail? Because keep in mind, I will say this, from my perspective, I don't know about yours, it is 110% the crowd's fault that Jesus was dead. Had they not been there, Pilate would have called him innocent and been on their way. But look at what verse 24 says. And then Pilate decided. It wasn't the crowd's decision to make, because the crowd wasn't the one with the power to kill Jesus. Only Pilate was. And so even though we might be pressured, and even though we might feel weighed down, and even though we might feel like, well, I was forced into this decision, I assure you that's how Pilate felt. But what does verse 24 say? And Pilate decided. He was the only one that could have made the decision. And even though he stood his ground for so long, and even though he fought a valiant fight in trying to free Jesus, he still chose to appease the number. He chose to appease the masses instead of doing what he knew to be the godly choice or path or route or avenue. So what about us? Will the roars of the crowd and maybe our desires for acceptance, the way that Pilate wanted to be accepted, will they outweigh what we truly know to be right? What internally, there's just something within us, there is a conscience within us telling us this is not what God would have. Which voice are we going to choose to follow? Because at the end of the day, no matter how extensive the outside pressures are, verse 24, it will be our decision. Maybe we'll have an excuse, and maybe we'll even have a good reason for it. Doesn't change the fact that it's still our decision and our decision to make. So there are going to be some game-changing life decisions that you and I are going to have to make over the next week, month, years. Are we going to let the voices of the crowd, who, keep in mind, are posed to us that they are the majority, even though they might not actually be? Are we going to listen to the voices of the crowd? Are we going to have this fueled desire for acceptance that lets us join them and think like them? Or are we instead going to do what Pilate did not have, I guess, the fortitude to do? Because keep in mind, he can wash his hands and say his hands are washed of it. But I can assure you, verse 24, and Pilate decided. He was the one to make the decision. Now granted, keep in mind, next week, next month, next year, you and I probably are not going to have somebody's life hanging in the balance where we have to decide if they live or if they die. But maybe there are some smaller decisions that it wouldn't hurt us if we took them that seriously. Maybe there are some little things that would turn into big things if we really thought about them and took them this seriously and chose the way that I guess we wish Pilate would have chosen. Because you and I are going to be the Pilate. Sooner or later, eventually it's going to happen. The question is, are we prepared for when we're put in that decision? And are we ready to answer the way we wish that he would have? All right. Never really done this before, so I guess I'll pray and then we'll be dismissed and everybody missed the storms. If you have any questions about tonight, come and talk to me, or get safely to your home and call me on the telephone. Or B, if you have something that you want to talk about, something you want to pray about, maybe you have not made things right with God and you want to, we will sit down and we will look through 1 Peter 3:21. We will look through the Gospel of Acts. And we will see where the book itself, in 1 Peter 3, says, baptism which corresponds to this now saves you, not as removal of dirt from the flesh, but as an appeal of good conscience before our God. If you want that appeal and you want Him to answer it in salvation, then let's get some wet sleeves tonight. Let's handle some things that need to be handled. If you need to pray about something, maybe you already have made that decision, you are right with God, but something's weighing on you, then you can have that same sense of restoration by us sitting down and taking it before Him and saying, we're going to change. God, please forgive me. And if we do that earnestly, we can handle it, and we can handle it before you leave tonight. But if you have any of those needs, don't let them wait. Talk to somebody. So let's close out in a prayer. Lord, we thank you for giving us this time together, and we thank you for who you are. We ask that you can please be with us as we go to our homes. Please help us to make it there safely. Be with us, our families, our loved ones, and even those beyond over the next evening. This community knows what it is like to be devastated by a storm like this, a tornado like this. So we ask that you just watch over us as you have so many times in the past. Be with us over the coming weeks when we're put in the position that Pilate was. Help us to choose the way you would have us to choose. Help us to be compelled by you and not by the crowd. And may we always seek acceptance and favor in your sight and not all of those that are around us. We ask that you can be with this upcoming weekend. Again, please help us to be prepared to plant seeds and prepared to evangelize and make relationships and build connections and lead people to the foot of the cross, because that is what this world so desperately needs, Lord, is you. Help us to be red flashing signs to help get them there. If there's anything that anyone in here needs tonight, please, we ask that heavy hearts don't leave this place heavy, and that we can reach out and talk to each other and lean on each other like what the church was designed for. We pray all this through your Son, Jesus. Amen. Dismissed. Just kidding.